In the last tutorial, we covered how to sculpt in ZBrush and how to export our models. So in this tutorial, we're going to cover how to import them into Maya and how to unwrap the UVs. So for this, you could either use the existing scene you had last time when you exported, or you can open into a brand new scene. Either way is fine. You would go into importing them in, File, Import. So then you would go over wherever that's saved at, I guess Desktop, ZBrush Demo. So we're going to do the bust high res. I'm going to import that and press F to find it wherever it landed. Alright, over here. So you can see this is our high res ZBrush export. If I click on this, there's a lot of polygons. This guy's roughly 186,000, which is enough that Maya is not crashing. It's maybe slightly lagging, but it's mostly fine. You can see there's nice and high topology detail in there. Let's go over to File, Import the next one. So this is going to be the pillar high res import. And we have our character sitting on a pillar. If you look closely, you can see the polygon faceted edges. They're all hard. If you want that kind of like stone texture, then you can leave it that way. If for some reason you wanted to smooth that out, if I click on this and go to Mesh Display, Soften Edge, it'll soften the edge and make everything a lot more smoother in there. It also softens the bumps a little bit, so if you're looking to have something a little more smoother, then that's great. If you're looking to have something a little more hard edge, let's say undo that, you can see it has a lot more texture detail. So that's because we, I guess, didn't decimate it quite enough to smooth it out, so it's depending on how well you decimate it. But if you wanted to smooth it, you can. For this guy, I could do the same thing and smooth out these details. Click on this guy, Mesh Display, Soft Edge. And so it'll smooth out these edges. So he's mostly in the same shape. I don't need to worry too much. I still have like some hair texture scratches in there. So I'll leave him with the smooth, but I'll leave this one without the smooth just so I can have more gritty stone detail. Alright, so that's the high-res model. What I want to do now is put these on their own layer and turn them off. So if I select both of these first, which is around 338,000 polys, if I click this button right here which has the circle on it, it'll create a new layer and automatically add these selected objects onto the layer. If I just wanted to make a brand new layer, I could click the new layer button and it'll make a new one, but there's nothing on that new layer. So if I press the V for visibility, it'll turn off the first layer I made by clicking the circle. There's nothing on this layer. I'll put the low res on this layer, but this keeps it a little organized. I can turn things off and on. I'm going to double click this and call this the HR high res layer. And I might as well call this one the low res layer. Alright, now let's go import our low res. So I go File, Import. This is the bust low res import, and repeat. Let's put in the pillar low res. Alright, so these are our two low res models. You can see there are a lot fewer polygons, so we're just under 5,000. So that should be fine enough for game resolution. The screen is not lagging at all. It's a lot fewer polygons. Let me add these two to the low res layer. You can do so by holding the right click and selecting Add Selected Objects. And that puts these on the low res, so I can turn these off and on, and I can turn these on. You'll see that the high res and low res are perfectly sitting on top of each other. What happens is we're going to project the high resolution details onto the low res, so don't move your original when you put it in there. They should be perfectly sitting on top of each other exactly the way they are. So again, don't move these once they get brought into Maya. Just put them on their own layer and turn them off. We won't be needing the high res until the end, so just turn that off. We're going to unwrap the UVs on the low res, so do it with the one with the fewer polygons. Don't mess with the one with the 100,000 polygons, just the lower end one. Alright, so everything seems to be fine. The first thing I want to do is select these and go to Mesh Display, Soften Edge. That way everything gets smoothed out. We want to make sure everything's smooth because when we do projecting the normals on there, we're going to get the high resolution detail placed on there. But if we have the hard edges left on, we're going to get hard edges built into it. So I'd rather not have the, as you can see here, all these jagged hard edges on there. So I'm going to put this back to smooth This way it's a lot smoother. In either case, I'm now going to need a texture on this guy. So let's go over to the Hypershade, Windows, Rendering Editors, Hypershade. There's also a shortcut button sitting right here, this little circle thing. That's the same button, Hypershade. Alright, let's go click a new Lambert. And so now I have a new Lambert. If I double click on this guy, he'll open up over here. And I'm going to attach on the color channel. I'm going to put a checker pattern on him. Click on that. And while I'm at it, I might as well set the checker pattern, the repeat value, a lot higher. So I'll put that at 25 by 25. So this is a lot more smaller squares. And let's middle mouse drag this guy onto the character. You'll notice that nothing happens. If I press 6 on the keyboard, go into texture mode, still nothing happens. I can drag it onto this and nothing happens either way. The reason is there's no UVs on this, so even though the texture is set to turn on, it doesn't know where to put the texture. So if I go to UV menu and go to the UV editor, I can open up the UV window, and if I click on this object, you can see the texture is already applied to it. It's a checker pattern, but it's not appearing here. If I click this, it'll turn it off in the window, but there are no UVs anywhere in the grid system, so it doesn't know where to put them. So what we want to do is unwrap this pillar. The easiest way, and this is a super basic method of unwrapping. There's a lot more detail to unwrapping UVs, but for a quick method, we want to rip off everything as easily as possible. And you have 3 different options here. You have the cylindrical, planar, and spherical. So we're going to use these 3. And let's say the easiest way is go into face mode. I'm going to rip off the whole top and then rip off the bottom. And then I can use the cylindrical and just grab the entire perimeter at once and peel that open. So let's grab the top, select the whole top. And I want to get rid of anything that's on the side. So I'm going to hold the control key and deselect any of these selected polygons. So I'm just grabbing what's sitting directly on the top of this pillar. Let's move that out of the way. Let's add some more there. And that should be good enough for the demo. Okay. And if I want to double check and didn't miss anything, I can press 4 on the keyboard and that kind of goes into wireframe mode. Everything looks fine. Alright, so with that done, let's go over to the UV. And I'm going to click on planar mapping. Go to the settings. And under the settings, I can do best plane. By doing best plane, it'll automatically pick it. Otherwise, I'd want to go to the y-axis because the y is the up and down axis and it would grab a top view of this. But best plane will work just fine. So I press that and it rips it off, and I now suddenly see texture on here because it applied the UVs into the UV space. I'm going to move that out of there so I can keep reusing this main coordinate system. Let's repeat the process on the bottom. I'll select all of the bottom section, hold Control, unselect all of the sides, and jump into some more detail. I don't need the stones, so let's deselect those. And that looks like everything on the perimeter. Let's get rid of that one. Alright, so that's probably everything we need there. Let's repeat the same steps. So UV, planar, unwrap. It's already set to best plane, so that's the bottom. So we have the top and the bottom. So those are unwrapped, nice and squared. Nice and square shape. So the last thing is to unwrap the rest of this. So let's select everything. I don't, however, need the stones, so I can hold Control and unselect those. And that should be everything there. Alright, and I also don't want to select what's already been unwrapped, these top pieces. So you can see here it highlights in the UV coordinate system. So if I hold Control and unselect these, and if that doesn't work, just make sure you're in face mode, and then hold Control and you can unselect those. By unselecting in this window, it just leaves exactly what's left is this. And that's quick and easy. Let's go to UV, and instead of doing planar on this side, planar on that side, and planar on all 4 sides, I can just do cylindrical, and it'll automatically unwrap everything straight across. Super simple, super easy. Alright, Now let's move this off the grid so I can keep using that. And if for some reason it's not quite unwrapping, the cut line might have occurred in the wrong place. We can see there's some stretching occurring down here. They're not small little squares, so there's kind of a zigzag kind of straight line, so we need to unwrap our polygons to make them look a little more consistent. So let's go to UV mode, and I might as well unwrap everything, so I'll just grab everything. We'll go to polygons, unfold, settings, and I usually use the legacy mode, not the regular unfold 3D. So legacy, and there's a couple settings we could play with here. But let's scroll down here. 10 seems to be a good number. Sometimes 5,000 is a little bit too much, so I usually set that down to 10. Then press apply, and you can start to keep pressing apply, and you'll see that it keeps adjusting these a little bit more and more and more until it starts to square everything out. So all of these squares in between the crevices are a lot more square-like. What you're hoping for is not to have any distortions, so you want everything to mostly hold a square shape as well as possible. In some areas, let's go to object mode, you can see there's a little bit of distortion in this corner and a little bit here. The cut line must be coming down around this area. So otherwise, for quick and easy unwrapping, that looks pretty decent. The square is a little bit larger here, so there's a little bit stretching going on compared to the other squares. But more or less that seems to work. If you have any issues, you can cut some UV edges. We can go into, let's say, the edge mode and select certain edges if they're not quite working, and you can go and cut them so it kind of unfolds a little better. But these seem to have unfolded quite well. I don't see any overlapping issues anywhere. So those are pretty good. Then let's go for the rock now. Let's go face mode, double click them, should select everything that's contained inside the area. And let's go for another unwrap. So we have option 3. We've done the cylindrical, we've done the planar. Let's do spherical now, because that's a circle. Click on this one, and it spherically unwraps it. We can see the result here. And let's unfold that again. So let's go to UV mode, select it, then polygons, unfold settings. It's up here. If for some reason it swaps back out, we can switch back here and click it, and that will revert it back to this mode. Set to 1, let's put that on something like 10, and then I can press apply. So sometimes it gets a little crazy, but it more or less squared it out. Some parts are a little distorted. It's not the best way of unwrapping. You should spend a little more time and find out where the seams are. If I go to edge mode and double click, it grabs the whole perimeter, and I can see that there's a cut line running right down the center. Probably not the best location for that. You probably want your cut lines to be more on the bottom. But for demo purposes and making this super simple, that can work for us. If we wanted to get a little more refined, I could quick planar the whole top and then quick planar the bottom side. But this should work. Next up, let's uncheck that. Actually, there's still a lot of distortion on that. Let's just do that anyway. We'll go face mode, select the whole top section, except for that, and except for that. So I just have this top section. Looks like all the seams are going to be on the bottom, so you don't see them very much. And then let's go with UV planar. So that rips off the whole section right there. And then I'll just repeat the same process. Face mode, UV planar. Alright, so I have the top of the rock and the bottom of the rock. You can see there's some stretching distortion, so let's go and grab these in UV mode. Grab these. If you don't do it in UV mode and you do it in, let's say, any of the other modes like face mode, it's going to unfold all the objects on your screen. So if I were to go to unfold settings, which is here, switch that back to legacy, and 10. So I'm not in UV mode, I'm in face mode, and I press apply. It's applying it to everything, which in this case isn't too bad. Alright, let's go back to object mode. You can see here there's a lot less distortion because I put it in a planar mode, and the seam is actually cut along the bottom where you're less likely to see it. So that should work for us. Let's take both of these. If this is the bottom face mode, let's scale this a bit smaller and put it next to this guy. Alright, so both those are the rock. Object mode. And we have a few other rocks to work with. Let's move this over here. And If I turn on the high res, I can see that some of these rocks turned out pretty well, and some of these rocks didn't turn out very well at all. A triangle is not quite enough quality for the object or the model we're looking with. So the Decimation Master didn't perfectly fix or reduce the tiny rocks. It did pretty well with everything else overall, but since it didn't do too well with these, I'm going to rebuild these guys. So let's turn off high res. I'm going to go to face mode, and I don't need this guy. I'll delete him, or this guy. I can delete him. Alright, so I've deleted out those, but now they're missing in the high res. So if I want to keep those in the low res model, I can reuse, I can build a new mesh. If I go to, let's say, face mode, double click on this, I can duplicate this and reuse this, or I can start with a whole new sphere and drop it in place. Either option. This one's already unwrapped, so I could easily drop it down there, or I could start with a new one. If I wanted to repeat this, I could press Ctrl D to duplicate, but unfortunately, it duplicated everything. So if I go back to object mode, you can see there's one here and there's one here. So I've duplicated everything, but that's still fine. I can go to face mode, select all of this, delete that out, select these, and I can either reuse these or I can reuse this one. Depends on the number of polygons I want to go with. This one has 12, this one has 44. So if I'm trying to keep my numbers lower, I can go to this. Let's turn on the high res and take a look. Which one would fit better? I'll probably get better quality with the larger one, but since they're so small, I could use the smaller ones. I guess I'll go with. I'll keep the big one. I'll delete out these, object mode, and put this. Actually, modify center pivot. Put the pivot in the center, and I can slide this back over there. Let's scale it, and since it already has UVs unwrapped on it, everything perfectly matches, or I don't have to redo it. Just keep repositioning this until it matches as well as possible. Let's rotate this, and I'll just reuse the same rock. As long as it's close enough, we can project the UV or the normal map. It doesn't have to be a perfect match, but the closer you can get it, the better. Alright, so we'll call that good enough for that rock. And let's repeat one more time. Ctrl D to duplicate, slide that over there, down a little bit, rotate. That's close enough. And I might as well do the same for these. Actually, those are fitting well enough. I'll just leave those alone. These have already been unwrapped. You may not see a difference here, but there's actually multiple sitting on top of here now. So if I go to shell mode and click this, I can move this, and actually, because they're not selected, they're different objects at the moment. So this object needs to get combined to all of these. So now if I go to mesh combine, it adds these two into the main category again, so it highlights everything. So now if I check this in shell mode, they're all overlapping because they've been copied, so all three have been sitting on top of each other. So if I paint one of them, it'll paint all of them. So that's fine. These last ones need to be unwrapped as well. Let's turn off high res, and let's unwrap this really quick. I'll do quick spherical, UV spherical. All right, call that good enough. Grab this one, repeat, spherical. Cool, call that good enough. There's kind of a uneven gap in the center. Let's go to, I guess, UV mode. Unfold the two new ones. It's actually sitting right here. Apply. Alright, so that cleans it up a little bit more. Let's move these a little bit closer together because these are all rocks. Make this a little smaller because these rocks are smaller than these rocks. So all the squares the same, a little more proportionally the same size. These are a little smaller, but that's fine. That's because they're overlapping these. Alright, so that unwraps all of that. So everything's looking pretty decent. And if I click it, it's all one piece. So cool. The last thing is, let's unwrap this. And again, as simple as you can make it, pick between those three different options. I'm going to go with selecting the bottom as a planar, and then cylindrical unwrap all the rest of them. So let's go over to selection, and I'm going to use the paintbrush selection, so I can just oops, I'm in vertex mode, face mode. Actually, let's put object, cancel out of that, object. Okay. Why is it still selecting object? Well, that's usually not normal. Looks like I'm kind of glitching it seems. For some reason it looks like it's still highlighted. It's in soft selection mode. If I double click this one over here, soft selection, turn that off. It's still selecting on these. If I go to vertex mode, select. Not sure why my mouse is messed up now. Well, that sure is strange. Alright, there we go. Just jam the buttons enough. Much better, fixed. Alright, back to object mode. So now let's go back to paint selection. Close out that one. So now, paint selection while in face mode, I can start brushing what I want. If I hold the B key for brush, I can make the brush radius larger, and then I can kind of paint a little bit easier. Kind of pick which ones I think should be the bottom of the guy. So let's select all of these. Let's move that out of the way. Alright, that's probably good enough for selecting the bottom of them. I can press 4 on the keyboard, go into wireframe mode, kind of see through it a little easier, see if I missed anything or if there's anything else I want. Okay, let's turn off 4. Push 6 to go back in texture mode, and then I can use the control key to deselect anything that's ending up on the front of them. Alright, we'll call that good enough. I could probably be a little more specific, picking certain things, but that's probably fine. Alright, so let's rip that off. So UV, planar, and I used the best plane and picked that. That's the bottom of them. So everything else that's left should be the rest of them. So I'll go in face mode and select everything, and then if I hold control and unselect here, it'll automatically unselect the bottom. So to recap, if I select it like this, I just grabbed everything, but I don't want to deselect this manually, so holding control I can grab what's in the UVs and unselect it. So now that's unselected. Let's do a quick cylindrical unwrapping on a hit, and by doing so, we want to try and make sure that the face doesn't get cut with the seam. It looks like the seam is on the outside behind the back of his head, which is perfectly fine. If you need to rotate where the cylindrical mapping is occurring, you can click the T right here, this little T shape, and that pulls up your move, scale, and rotate. I can click on the rotate axis, and that'll pull up the rest of the rotates, and from here I could rotate where this is occurring at. And we're going to sliding as you can see that it's moving the topology of the cut line. I want to leave the cut in the back of his head, so if I control Z that, because it was already just fine like that, we'll call it good enough. Alright, so that's pretty much fine. Let's go to UV mode, and I might as well just grab everything and go to unfold, press apply, and it should start unfolding everything. Just click that a few times and see if there's any distortions anywhere. Alright. It looks like some of these could be merged together. Let's see if I can merge these two. Let's go to edge. If I click it, you can see that they both highlight, so they both want to be connected. So I can go to polygons, move and sew, and that keeps it a little more cleaner. Just connected those two edges. It looks like this whole side right here is part of the top of his head. So I might as well cut this off down the center of his head and put this on the other side, because you can see there's kind of a gap right there. So I can go polygons, cut UV edges, and then I can take the remaining edges right here, and let's include this one, so it's all of these, and we'll go polygons, move and sew, and it puts it on that side. So I just kind of rearranged it, and this one might as well move and so as well. This kind of cleans things up a little bit more. So now if I select everything and repeat the unfold option, you can see that the cut mark is running down the back side of his head. I don't want to go too far forward because you'll start to see it, but there is a little bit of distortion occurring in the face. You can see that the squares are much larger here, which means you're losing resolution. The smaller and denser the squares, the more resolution you have. So I want to try and find a way that I can get as much resolution as I can out of this. I could leave it as is and call it good enough, but I can also try and tweak this depending on where it is. I could try and go through cutting. Let's edge mode, double click. I guess that doesn't work. But this is running down side of his shirt, so I could take his head and cut that separate from his body, and then you wouldn't see the seam very well. It's on the inside. Or I can call this good enough for the demo. There is some overlapping right here. If I click on this edge, find out where that edge is located at. Looks like it's the back side right here, which is where I want the cut line to be anyway, but it's not quite matching too well. Let's try shell. Yep, shell, it's still one piece, but I don't want to go with one piece. Let's go back to edge. If I click this and try and move it, you can see it's overlapping. It's going to cause some distortions because there's too many UV sitting on top there. So let's try and unfold a little better. Let's go all of there. So if you want to select something like that, you can grab a bunch of them, hold control, hold right click, and go to shell, and it grabs all the UVs inside of the contained outer selections. Let's try and apply this again, see if I can unfold a little better. I can try sliding up to global, apply again, and slide it back down to off. And it starts to keep going back and forth, but it's still not correcting for the overlap right here. So I guess the easiest way would just be to selectively pick what I want and just cut that whole part off. So I'm going to go with face mode, selection like this, start over with the selection and kind of select all of that I want to keep. So that selects that. I want to not include that, but I kind of want to include that. Alright. And I might as well uninclude that. Let's go to regular selection, get rid of that one, and that one. Alright, so if I try and move these, you can see they're still connected right here, but there's a little bit of overlap. So if I want to cut these off, looks like I missed one right here, add that one. I can go to, I guess I'll try cylindrical again, UV, cylindrical, and move that out of the way. So I've just ripped the entire closed section off from the rest of his head. You can see the cut line around his neck, but that's less likely to be seen. So now if I go to UVs, select everything, polygons, unfold settings, actually it's just sitting right here, and apply. Everything's looking a lot cleaner now. UVs, shell, move this. There's an extra piece sitting right here. This piece is corresponding to the back of his head, so let's go put that where it needs to go. Chances are it's going to fit in this area, so let's go to edge mode, select all these edges, and you can see it's starting to highlight these. Let's grab enough of them, and we'll go polygons, move and so, and looks like it's grabbing too many. So I'll just grab these and repeat, move and so. Alright, this one could probably repeat, G to repeat the last command. This one looks like these are trying to grab something else, so I'm going to leave those alone because they're trying to grab, I guess, what's on this side. UVs, unfold everything again, and we'll call that good enough. We have him. These can probably get cut off here and moved over there if I wanted to. Looks like all of these are on there. So let's grab this one, and this one. Polygons, cut these off, which is right there, cut UVs, Then I can take all the remaining UVs, polygons, move and so, and it should remove that and put it perfectly over here. So now if I go back to UVs and unfold everything, click that enough times so you can see it kind of cleaned all that part out. Everything's nice and clean and organized. His face is in the center, cuts down the back of his head, cuts off at the neck. These all become the clothes area. These are quite jumbled up, or not super jumbled up, but kind of condensed. So you can see that there's a lot larger squares here. So these would have to be trimmed up a little bit. There's a lot more work that could be done to kind of clean this up a little bit since it wasn't too clean to begin with over there. But more or less that seems to work. I could also slice up around the neck, and that would kind of let the face relax a little more. So one more try. Let's go up to here. So I'll slice all the way up his neck down to his chin. So again, something you're not likely to see the seam too well, but it should fix any large square distortions over here. So I'll go polygons, cut, then go back to UVs, select everything here, and apply. And you can see it's separating around his chin area. And by separating around his chin, the squares are getting smaller here. I could try and bump this from 10 to, let's say, 100. And let's try that. Sometimes you get some major distortions if you set the numbers too high, so I'm going to leave this at 10 and just go incrementally a little smaller. And if I keep clicking this, you can see as I keep clicking, the squares start to even out a bit more. And as they start to even out, I can help it a little bit. This side's a little bit larger than this side. I can scale that a little bit smaller to kind of balance with the other side, and then even it out again by pressing apply. Object mode, and you can see everything is pretty square shaped, and that should work just fine. So now I have all these extra pieces, and if I click on this, I have all these pieces as well, and I want to put these all in the same location. So first of all, since I want to make this object one clickable object that I can drop in there, I have no need to make head separate from the base. I might as well make these completely attached the whole time in the game. If you wanted them separate, you could, but I'm going to go Mesh and Combine so that they are one piece now. This way when I click it and put it in Unity, in the game engine, it's one piece. So now I need to put all these inside this one grid area for the final unwrapping. I also need to delete the history at some point. So let's first of all make sure all the squares are the same size. The head, actually let's go to shell mode. The head could probably be a bit larger. The larger it is, the smaller the squares. I want to kind of make the head the most important part, so let's make it a little bit larger to make sure the squares are a little bit smaller. There we go. Okay. So everything looks proportionally about the right size. So now that they're the right size, actually the rocks are too big. Scale these a bit smaller. So they're about the right size now. Alright, so let's put all of these in the same location. Grab everything, scale everything down, and scale as small as the largest object. So I'll take this and start playing Tetris with some of these things. Move this here, move this there. I can rotate. This is underneath of his head. Rotate that a little. And so the rotate is the W, E, and R, which is the same thing as corresponding to right here. I just use the keyboard shortcuts, it's quicker. So everything needs to be a bit smaller. So I'll make these smaller. You want to take up as much space as possible in the texture space because it'll give you better resolution. Let's rotate this a little more, put that over there. I might as well drop the rocks in the gap right there, just because they fit. I can let's rotate this guy. This could probably be even smaller because you're less likely to see it, but he fits pretty well. Alright, the last thing left is this, and he's not fitting very well. So let's move this out of the way. It's very large, so let's put this one in place here. Let's see if I can take some of these elsewhere. Take all of these, Put these over here. Put his clothes over here. And make sure they stay inside the texture space. This one's the bottom. You're less likely to see this one, so I'm going to make this a lot smaller. Put this over here. This one's the bottom of him as well. You're less likely to see it, so I'm going to make that a lot smaller. So even though they're not staying proportionally the same size, it still works. So now that I've cleared out some room, I can move this one. Let's move this one first. Move this, rotate them. And take this. And this one isn't as important, but more important than those. So you want to fit the most important stuff first. Alright, so all those fit. And then, now that I have the extra room, I'll make this a little bit larger. Grab all of these. Make sure everything stays inside the 0 to 1 section. I can make this a lot larger, give more resolution to his head, and then fit all this in the remaining areas. So that can go there, that can go there, and the rocks can fit somewhere here. Okay, and that cleanly puts everything in quadrants. If I go back to object mode, you can see everything's been unwrapped nice and clean, and everything is ready now for projection mapping. Everything, the seam is cut down here. You can see where they don't match too well. So you want to hide seams as well as possible by putting them in places you won't often look. Okay, close out that, and let's delete out this history. Edit, delete by type, history. Once you've cleared the history, we can rename this guy to pillar. Sometimes it pops little names in there. Cool. Alright, and that should cover how to unwrap.